I'm going to talk to you about what happens when a person meets a hurricane in another country. That's the tease. Let me share the screen. Let's go right into this right here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about death, but we're going to start here. Last time, if you're with me, friends, we talked about some leadership lessons, and I tell unreal stories and try to put leadership lessons in there. We talked about the idea of influence is power, and leadership is influence. Influence is power. You can either empower or overpower. You can serve, liberate, and come alive, or you can overpower, manipulate, dominate, which leads to death. So the humility-based leaders are for others. Pride-based leaders are for yourself. But what's really in the middle of all of this is something we call self-preservation. It's the wall of self-preservation. The three questions that are really important to ask, and I'll get to why I'm bringing this up here in a minute, is three questions of self-preservation are: what are you afraid of losing? What are you trying to hide? And what are you trying to prove? Now, each one of those questions, they can hit you really, really hard. Like right now, if I was honest and go, what am I really afraid of losing? What am I afraid of trying to hide? Not really much. What am I trying to prove? Might be a little bit of things in there. So the first one and third one have a lot of weight right now. In a different season, it could be a different answer. So it's important to understand walls of self-preservation are really what keep you from truly being yourself and truly liberating. One more piece before I get into the story. Self-preservation is when you overprotect the things that you're afraid of losing, you lose them sooner. When you're trying to prove yourself to someone, you actually don't prove yourself. You lose influence. When you're afraid of losing something, you'll try to grasp onto things and end up losing them because people don't want to be around you. That's just an example. Well, that sets the tone of the topic of conversation I want to talk to you about today, because the story is what was I afraid of losing? And I want to tell you the story of my death and of what that looked like for me and what happened in my life. 2002, September the 22nd, 2002. My wife and I, Kelly, we took some friends of ours, Ryan and Carmel, and we went to Mexico, went to Cancun. It was September. We were about to start GiANT. This was right before we started GiANT. And we went down there with a whole premise of getting a vacation in before the startup. And the other piece was Cancun in September is rather cheap, primarily because there's these swirly big monsters out in the ocean who like to go to Cancun in September and October as well, or August through October. So what happened is we got a really good rate at an all-inclusive, and we went. And as we were getting down there, we had 2-3 really good days, and then the last day they started boarding up our hotel. The hurricane that we saw coming over Cuba, we thought it was going to go north, and it never did. It kept going straight across to the west and hit Cancun directly. It was Hurricane Isidore, Category 3 hurricane. Some of you heard me tell this story before. A lot of you, it's the first time. So if you've ever been in a hurricane, it's really interesting. It depends on the category. It depends on the location. It depends on where you're at. It can feel like a crazy storm, or it can feel like total demolition. And in our case, they said you can move in to the main conference area, and they had beds, and we're going to be like refugees living in for a few days in this resort, or they could move us in town, give us a hotel room, and we'll be closer to the airport. So we chose to go in town in Cancun, and they gave us this hotel. It was a flea bag. It was so bad of a hotel. We're like, we're not staying here for the day. So it was rainy because of the hurricane, but the eye of the hurricane was coming that evening. So we did some shopping, and then I saw this movie theater like a mile from our hotel. I'm like, you know what? Let's go see a movie. It'll finish. Then we can go into the hotel. We'll stay in this flea bag in a sketchy hotel just overnight. We'll get up the next morning, and hopefully there'll be a flight. Golden. So, as most Americans think they can do all of these things, or at least I think I could do those things. So, yeah, we went to a movie. We went to see Signs by Mel Gibson, which is funny. The crop circles, faith, aliens movie, really interesting movie. And when I was in the movie, if you haven't seen it by now, by the way, it's been out like 15 years. Like you had plenty of time So I'm basically telling you now what happened. So with us, we basically, we're watching this movie, and in the movie, he loses his wife, Mel Gibson does. And he's a vicar, and he gives up his faith in God. And by the way, I'm going to be very, very personal with this story because it's a personal story. And I'm going to share things with you that I don't normally share. And they are spiritual of nature. So please don't get offended. Just is. It happened. This is a very personal story. In it, Mel Gibson loses his wife, gives up his faith in God. After the movie, it really, really affected me. So I get back into the taxi. There's one entrepreneurial taxi driver. I said, take us there. We're 45 minutes or an hour away from the eye of the hurricane. We see our hotel. It's just right there. I had to pay him a little bit extra. And so I'm in the front seat. Kelly's behind me. Carmel and Ryan are next to us. And while we're there, and I'm thinking this thought. And Kelly's behind me. They're talking. It's 10 o'clock at night. We're just trying to get to our hotel room, and it's just crazy. Sideways rain. You get the whole gist. Palm trees leaning over. It was chaos. But I couldn't help thinking this. Man, if anything happened to Kelly, would I be like Mel Gibson? Would I give up faith in God, or would I doubt like that? If anything happens to my kids? So I just had this little internal prayer. God, if anything happens to Kelly, then I'll trust you. I won't be like Mel Gibson, which is a funny prayer. If anything happens to Addison or Will or Kate, I'll trust you. And then if anything happens to me, I'll trust you. And so all of a sudden, there I am in this car, and I said that prayer, and it was 2 seconds later, literally 2 seconds, Kelly screams out from the back, watch out! And I looked and turned, and right in my ear is a headlamp, basically. And a drunk driver joyriding in Mexico in a hurricane, as you do, at 10:30 at night, comes and hits the side of the car. When it hit the car, it crushed me. I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. I don't know why. It was in a taxi. I just didn't have a seatbelt. But I think I was glad I didn't, because I don't know if I would have been alive if I had been. But what it did is it pushed me into the taxi driver's seat. It pushed me into the console. Now, this gets really graphic, so I apologize. My sternum popped out probably 6 inches, and my rib cage snapped, and I broke 9 ribs eventually. Were confirmed. There was some clean breaks and then fractures, and completely crushed from this car. Hit so hard on the side and into the other side. I was paralyzed from the waist down. I had severed intestines. I had bruised every organ. I had everything you could imagine. It was not fun. It hurt. The pain was unbelievable. It was like ice picks on your back, going back and forth constantly. And what happened to me was I basically immediately started saying out loud, I'm so glad it was me. I'm so glad it was me. Because I just had this conversation. We just talked about this. So I was saying I was so glad it was me externally, but internally I was really calm. Externally I was screaming with pain. But the internal conversation was like, okay. I'm looking around. No, there's lots of glass out. It's chaos. The door's crushed. How is there no blood? I'm thinking that. How's there no blood? Now I look down and I can't feel my feet. Okay. My back. Oh, I can see my sternum. It was surreal. And I was going, yeah, I'm paralyzed. My back's broken. Okay. And it was just like logic was hitting me in the middle of this stress and shock. And so we were there about 30, 40 minutes before the ambulance came. And our friends are out and they're trying to help. The taxi driver stumbles out. He's out of the car. Kelly's hurt. She's behind me. She's trying to prop me up and help me. And I start having this conversation with God and with myself. And it was like this, I can't believe I'm not going to make it, because I realized I was not getting any breath. My lungs were so stretched, I couldn't get any breath. And I was like, I'm not going to make it. I'm going to die in Mexico. 30 years old, dying in Mexico. I never would have guessed. It was that kind of surreal moment. And so then what took place was me having this dialogue that got real serious. And I was basically asking this question. Okay, God, was I your man? Was I a good husband, and was I a good dad? And that's all I could think of. I had, in my 20s, I had done a lot. I had started a lot of companies. I had lived in Russia, as you know the stories. I had worked for a private equity group. I had some .coms. I had just done a lot. And so there was nothing that I even thought of. None of that came to mind. I could care less. The only thing I could ask on my deathbed was I your man? Was I a good husband? Was I a good dad? And so what happened was I go on this little journey. It was like I asked the question, and then this keynote, like a presentation, started. And it was like 10 years old and 13 and 15 and 18 and 20 and all these dates and times. And it was like a slideshow. I was seeing my life flash before my eyes. It was unbelievable. I saw the same with Kelly, all of our marriage and all of our history. I saw our kids, Addison, Will, and Kate. And it was almost like when I finished, I was at peace. Okay. And I'm one of those guys, like, you read this story, this is what you read about. I experienced it. And when I was finished with it, I was done. I was ready. I was like, okay. And I'll never forget. I kind of leaned back, and I was already leaned back, but I was resting. And I looked up at Kelly, and she's over me. And I shake my head because I was not getting any breath, but I was letting her know I wasn't going to make it. And this is crazy. She had no idea what I was thinking. She looks over me and she says, I know, it's okay. She says, I want you to know that you are God's man. You are a great husband and a great dad. And I was like, are you kidding me? Did you just say that? You have no idea. And I literally breathed my last breath, and I was done. And when I was done, it was like total peace. No oxygen, no breath, but I could remember just literally like lifting straight up out of the car. And this is where it gets weird. And you go, yeah, Jeremie's a weirdo. But I don't care. It happened. I'm telling you what happened. I can look down and see the car. I could look down and see the accident. It was like I could see raindrops. It was that level of peace and that level. And I had no pain whatsoever. And again, this is where it gets really interesting. I had Carmel, who came in and heard and saw what was going on. And she just goes, no. And I could hear that too. No. And she said this simple prayer: in the name of Jesus, give him breath. Put her hand on my arm. And when she said that, I came right back into the car, right back into the pain. And all of a sudden, the ambulance shows up. And these guys get out. Remember, I'm in Mexico. And this ambulance happens to show up. And it's crazy. It's chaos. They pull me out of the ambulance, or the car, put me on a stretcher and try to flatten me out. They didn't check anything if my back was broken. My back wasn't broken. I had a stinger on like nerve endings. And when I moved, I could actually start feeling my feet again. But I had just broken all my rib cage and all of the other damage that was there. So we go on this joyride of a hurricane, over trees, around, up on curbs, just to get around debris. It was awful. And I'll save you all the gory details, but they brought us into a hospital in Mexico in a hurricane with no running water, with no electricity. And we're just, it was awful. And we see all these bedpans stacked up. There's blood on the sheets. There was mold. It was just a rough MASH unit is what it was like. And so they put us in ER. And so in the emergency room, it looked like this. And there I am, and there's Carmel helping Kelly, and my wife. She's so amazing. She's smiling because that's what you do when you take when there's someone that takes a picture, you smile. So she's smiling, but she was in pain, and I was out of it, and my chest had kind of gone back down. They didn't know all the damage at this point of me. They just had given me morphine, which it was great, right, for that moment. And I was out of pain for a little bit, and then they did x-rays and sonograms and all that, and they saw my intestines were severed. And so what happened over the next period of time, between that day and 10 days later, there was another hurricane that hit. There was 2 hurricanes in an 11-day period. And so I went through surgery. I came out of surgery. And when they went into the surgery, they basically said, here's his intestines, 90% chance he'll have to wear a bag the rest of his life, 50% chance he doesn't make it out of this. Prepare his wife. That's what they told my friend Ryan. And so there I am. I made it. I made it through the surgery. There were all types of crazy experiences and miracles that took place, honestly. We got out of Cancun. There was a major bill that we had to pay before we could do the surgery, and it was out of network for insurance. And so we paid that amount only to get home back to America. And we got a check in the mail from our first client who said for tax reasons they need to pay us 6 months in advance. And it was the same dollar amount, the same exact dollar amount that we paid. So that is how we started GiANT. We started it with death that led to life and being alive. And so the concept of like, what are you afraid of losing? Well, I'll never forget, I've had lots of people who said, would you ever want to go through that again? I'm like, well, weirdly, no and yes. If it was like that, what it did to us is it basically caused my wife and it changed our life radically. It changed a number of things. It changed the way that it changed what I feared. I don't fear death. I really don't. It's crazy. I'm not looking for it, but I don't fear it. I experienced it. I experienced what it looked like. I was so close to that. I've been in a bad situation. I've been in a hurricane. I've been in a bad hospital. I've been in, we've had a lot more stories I'm not telling you in this that are probably more personal that happened. My parents came down to help. There was some things that we all experienced that changed our perspective on faith, on living, on everything. So from that perspective, yeah, I would do it again. In a weird way, I would do it again because of what I learned from it. But what I feel like I got from it was a level of faith. And I don't mean just faith like a religious faith. I mean a faith, a belief faith. Yeah, faith in God and a faith in the process of like, I just believe. I believe that things can change. I believe that you can do certain things. I believe that God is faithful. I believe that, but at the end of my life, the questions of, was I a good husband? Was I a good dad? Was I your man? Was I a good husband? Was I a good dad? Those were the most important questions. And they're more important than work, more important than leadership, more important than all those things. But what they did for me, it gave me a aptitude, it gave me a hunger to help people overcome their fear and worry. I believe that worry is a prayer of disbelief. Worry is a prayer of disbelief. And so if you're worrying constantly, then there's an issue. There's something that you haven't resolved yet. And for me, it's not that I don't worry. I'm human. It's in me. It's in all of us. But I will tell you that I have an attitude of who says we can't? And I've been through some stuff. I got hit by a drunk driver. I've been in a hurricane. I've lost my life, I was gone for 4.5 minutes in that process. And I came back, and I'm living, and I'm here today. I have an old man hip. When it's cold, my hip hurts, and I have a sternum that's super sensitive, so I have to watch my seatbelt because it's never really restored. But my ribs restored. We used the monies to start GiANT in the very beginning, and that's how we started the process. So for me, when I look at hard times, hard things, sometimes it's like, bring them on. Yeah. Perseverance leads to character. And so persevering in tough situations make better if we choose to have that experience. So where I'm at is I have a belief that that individuals can actually become stronger. I have a belief that if you actually look up and see things from a higher perspective, then it gives you the courage that you need to do the things that are in front of you.